It was just another rainy Monday in Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traoré was finishing paperwork when his assistant knocked gently and handed him a phone. "Mr. President," she said, "it's Oprah Winfrey's team. They want you on her show." He raised an eyebrow. "Oprah? The American talk show host?" She nodded. "They say they want to talk about the man behind the uniform." He thought for a moment. He'd heard of Oprah, of course. Who hadn't? But flashy, lights and studio applause weren't really his world. After a pause, he said quietly, "Tell them I'll do it." No one, not Oprah, not Traoré, not even the seasoned producers, could have guessed what would happen next. By Wednesday night, Ibrahim was backstage at Oprah's studio in Chicago. The atmosphere buzzed with energy. He sat calmly in the green room, dressed not in military fatigues, but in a simple dark suit that still carried the quiet dignity of a soldier. Oprah entered moments before the show, radiant and warm. She extended her hand. "Mr. Traoré, welcome." He stood. "It's an honor," he replied, his voice soft but unwavering. The two smiled politely, but beneath it, there was something deeper, a sense that something real might surface tonight. The show began like any other. Bright lights, polite applause, the comfort of familiar format. Oprah started gently, his childhood, his journey, his dreams for Burkina Faso. Traoré answered simply. No grand speeches, no political slogans, just stories, honest ones. Then came the moment that changed everything. Oprah leaned in, eyes narrowed, not unkind, but direct. "Mr. Traoré," she said, "you speak so passionately about hope. But let's be real. Burkina Faso is still one of the poorest nations in the world. People are struggling. Children go hungry. How do you lead with hope when your people are suffering?" There it was. The silence in the room thickened. Some gasped. Cameras zoomed in. Oprah had asked the question no one else would dare. Traoré didn't blink. He looked straight at her, not with anger, not with ego, just a steady calm. And then he said the words that would stop the show cold. "Poverty," he said, "isn't just about lacking money. Poverty is when a mother goes unseen, when her child cries and no one listens, when a man spends his whole life working soil that never feeds his family and still gets told he's lazy." Oprah froze. "It's not empty pockets that destroy people," he continued. "It's the feeling that the world has already decided you don't matter." The audience sat still. Not a cough, not a whisper, just the weight of his words settling like dust. "I've met children," he said, "who have nothing, but they still dream. And I've met people in power who have everything and feel nothing. So who's really poor?" Oprah's face shifted. Her usual poise softened. She looked at him differently now, not as a guest, but as someone who had just handed her a mirror. She lowered her eyes. When she looked back up, her voice was shaky. I never thought of it that way," she said. And then the tears came. Not for the cameras, not for drama. Just truth, finally breaking through. The segment that was supposed to be just another celebrity interview became something else entirely. It was a conversation about worth, about what it means to lead, about how the world measures people and how wrong that measurement can be. Long after the credits rolled, people kept talking about it, not because of what was said, but because, for once, someone had the courage to say it. There's a moment, once in a lifetime, when a conversation stops being just words and becomes something else. Something you feel. Something that leaves a mark. That moment happened on live television when President Ibrahim Traoré sat across from Oprah Winfrey. It started with a question, a hard one. But what followed left Oprah speechless. and the world watching in tears. She looked at him, steady, calm, composed, and tried to gather herself. Oprah began, then paused. Ibrahim didn't interrupt. He just sat there, patient, quiet, eyes kind. Finally, she found her voice again. "I've sat with presidents, kings, billionaires," she said almost in a whisper. "But no one has ever spoken like that, and no one has ever made me feel it like that." The studio was still. Oprah placed her hand gently on her chest as a tear slipped down her cheek. Her voice trembled. "I've spent my life telling stories," she said, "but tonight, I think I finally heard one I never truly understood." Ibrahim didn't say much, just reached for his glass, took a sip, and then looked at her. His words were quiet, but they landed like thunder. It's never too late to see people again. And just like that, the energy in the room changed. You could feel it. From the front row to the farthest camera operator, something shifted. Someone sniffled, then another. A woman near the front wiped her eyes. In the back, a man let out a soft, stifled sob. Even the cameramen, those who had seen it all, were blinking back tears. Oprah looked up again, her eyes shining, but her smile soft. "You have a gift," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You remind us what it means to be human." But Ibrahim shook his head gently. "No," he said. "I just remind people of what they already know, but forgot how to say." That's when the applause started. Soft, scattered at first, then swelling, rising like a wave. A full standing ovation. Oprah stood too. Cameras still rolling, lights still blaring. But in that moment, none of it mattered. She stepped forward and hugged him, holding him tight. Not as a host, but as a woman who had just been reminded of something she didn't know she was missing. And across living rooms, bedrooms, and break rooms around the world, people watching felt something stir, something we've all needed: hope. As the show continued, Oprah leaned in, voice still shaky, and asked quietly, "If you could change just one thing in the world right now, what would it be?" Ibrahim looked down at his hands, thought deeply. The room waited. When he looked up, his eyes carried a weight that needed no introduction. "I would erase the idea that some lives matter less than others." And the room froze. "We've built a world," he said slowly, "where value is measured by wealth, by skin tone, by what country you're born in. But the tears of a mother holding her dying child in Burkina Faso are no different than the ones shed here." Oprah's eyes welled up again. He leaned forward, lowered his voice to a near whisper. "The greatest violence," he said, "is making someone feel like they were born to be invisible." The words hung in the air like mist. Heavy, still, honest. People in the audience were no longer just watching an interview. They were witnessing truth, raw, unfiltered, human. Then Ibrahim shared something small, but unforgettable. Just before his trip to America, a young boy in Burkina Faso had clung to his leg, not to ask for money, but to plead. "Please, if you go, don't forget us." And that was it. That's what broke the room. People cried openly. Some whispered prayers. One woman near the back clutched her chest and whispered, "He's right. He's so right." Oprah reached across the table, but couldn't speak. Her hand rested on her heart. Words failed her. Even before the cameras cut to black, clips of the moment had already begun spreading online. The hashtag, "Don't Forget Us," exploded. Millions watched the replay, stunned by the depth of what had happened. People began sharing their own stories. of being unseen, unheard, forgotten. From street sweepers to caregivers, refugees to teenagers, everyone had a moment they remembered being invisible. Now, they felt seen. What started as an interview became something far more powerful. A reckoning, a reminder, a quiet revolution of empathy, sparked not by a headline, but by one man who dared to say, "You matter. I see you, and I will not forget you." And in a noisy world where so many voices scream for attention, this moment whispered something we all needed to hear, and none of us will forget it. As the final moments of the interview unfolded, the live chat was a flood of raw emotion. Thousands of people from every corner of the world were typing the same thing. "I'm crying." "Why does this hit so hard?" "Because it's true." Back in the studio, Oprah slowly rose from her seat, visibly shaken. She took Ibrahim Traoré's hand in hers and said the only thing she could muster, "I don't know what to say, but I promise, I won't forget this." He stood beside her and for the first time that night smiled, not for the cameras, but for her. "That," he said gently, "is all I've ever asked of anyone." They embraced, quiet and unhurried. No stage performance, just two people, meeting at the core of something real. In the shadows behind the cameras, a veteran producer, someone who prided himself on never breaking down, was wiping tears from his face. Because in that quiet, unexpected moment, the entire room remembered what it felt like to simply feel human again. As the show went to commercial, the room was still. Oprah sat frozen, no notes, no lines to read. Just silence and a deep, aching truth inside her. Ibrahim leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You look like someone carrying the whole world." She blinked, attempting a smile. "I'm supposed to." He tilted his head softly. "But you weren't born to." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, her composure cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek. "You deserve to be seen too," he said gently. Something broke open in her then, not from sadness, but from recognition. The countdown to go back, live, started. Cameras readied, lights adjusted. But in that fragile silence, she turned to him and whispered, "How do you keep your heart open when the world keeps breaking it?" His answer would become the most replayed moment of the entire broadcast. "You can't heal what you won't let yourself feel." And with those few words, everything changed. When they came back from the break, Oprah's voice was different, softer, stripped of performance. She leaned in, curious and vulnerable. "Where does this wisdom come from? Were you always like this?" Ibrahim looked away for a moment. "No," he said, "I wasn't born wise. I was born in dust." And with that, he began to tell his story, of a childhood spent under a rusted tin roof, of a mother who boiled stones in a pot just to silence her children's hunger pains, of a woman who whispered at night, "We may have nothing in our hands, but never let your heart go empty." He paused. "When I was 5, he said, voice trembling, I asked her why she didn't cry. A hush fell over the room. She told me, if I cry, who will teach you how to hope? Even the studio lights seemed dimmer after that. Some in the audience wept openly. Others simply sat there, breathless. Oprah covered her mouth, shaking. Ibrahim continued, his tone barely audible. Pain can make you bitter, or it can make you better. But you have to choose. The words hit like lightning. And still, not a single person clapped. Because no one could. It was too real. By the time the interview neared its end, it had already gone viral. Clips raced through social media before the final credits aired. Better not bitter. Don't forget us. Both were trending within minutes. One viewer wrote, This man just said what I've carried my whole life but never knew how to say. Another, for the first time in years I felt seen. Back on stage, Oprah's eyes were still wet. She reached across the table and said, "You've given us a gift tonight." Ibrahim shook his head softly. "No, the gift is that you listened." Then, without a word, he pulled a worn, folded photo from his jacket. It was his mother, holding him as a child. He laid it gently on the table. "She'd want you to remember something," he said. "No matter how much you carry, you're never carrying it alone." Oprah picked up the photo with trembling hands. Her tears fell freely now. The audience stood, clapping louder than they had all night. But this time they weren't applauding a show. They were honoring a truth. As the noise settled, Oprah leaned down under her seat, fumbling for something. Her hands shook as she looked back up. "I wasn't going to share this," she said, her voice barely holding. Then she unfolded a single piece of paper. Creased, aged. "It's a letter," she said softly, "from a girl in Southside Chicago, years ago." The camera zoomed in. She continued, tears pooling. She said she wanted to end her life because she believed no one would ever see her. No one would ever care. Oprah paused, staring at the paper. "I didn't know what to say back then. I still don't." She turned to Ibrahim. "But now I think, maybe you just answered her. That night wasn't just an interview. It wasn't news. It wasn't entertainment. It was a mirror held up to all of us, and a gentle voice reminding us, you matter. You're not invisible, and it's never too late to feel again. There are interviews, and then there are moments that stop time. This was the second kind. What started as a thoughtful conversation between Oprah Winfrey and President Ibrahim Traoré had already broken open something raw and real. But no one, not even the producers, could have predicted what would happen next. Oprah held a worn letter in her hand. She had carried it with her for years, written by a girl from Chicago's South Side, a girl who had once wanted to give up on life because, as she wrote, "I didn't think anyone would care if I disappeared." Her voice cracked as she held it up for Ibrahim to see. "Tonight," she said, "you said what I always wished I'd known how to say to her." Ibrahim leaned forward and gently took the letter. He read it silently, his expression steady, then looked up at Oprah and said, "She's still here." Oprah's breath caught in her chest. "Yes," he said softly, "because when even one person chooses to see her, really see her, she can find the courage to stay." The room was utterly silent, not from awkwardness, from reverence. That's when a studio staffer slipped Oprah a handwritten note. The girl, that girl, had just posted on social media, "I just watched this and I'm still here. Thank you." The air in the studio felt electric. Something larger than the show was happening right in front of everyone. Oprah whispered something to her producer, and moments later, a phone rang on the studio table. She picked it up and pressed the speaker. A trembling voice came through. "Miss Winfrey, is this really live?" Oprah turned to Ibrahim, then gently replied, "Yes, sweetheart, we're live." The young woman broke down. "I saw you, and him, and I just wanted to say, thank you. I didn't think anyone saw me." Ibrahim's voice didn't waver. His eyes were wet, but calm. "You are seen," he said firmly, "and you matter more than you know." There was a long pause, and then the girl whispered, "You saved me." That was the moment Oprah wept. Not on camera, not for the audience, just as a human. Ibrahim rose quietly, walked over and rested his hand on her shoulder. "You've been saving people for years," he said gently. "Tonight, you just remembered why." The room applauded, not the polite clapping of television. This was slow, soulful. Some were standing, others wiping tears. Nobody looked away. When Oprah finally gathered herself, she turned to him. "You have the heart of a lion," she whispered. But he just smiled faintly. Nothing proud, nothing theatrical, just human. The interview wrapped, but no one moved. The usual shuffle of shoes, the buzz of phones, all gone. People just sat there, letting the moment hold. As Oprah stood to say goodbye, she embraced him, her voice barely holding steady. "I thought I was here to interview you," she said. "But in 1 hour, you've taught me more than I've learned in years." Ibrahim's response was quiet, but it stayed with people long after the lights dimmed. "Pain teaches faster than privilege ever will," he said. "But what we choose to do with that pain, that's where the heart comes in." Online, the world exploded. The hashtag #SureLionHeart trended worldwide. Another, "I am seen," became a global statement. One post read, "If every leader spoke like Ibrahim Traoré, maybe we'd remember what it means to be human." Another said simply, "This man didn't speak at us. He spoke to us, and I finally felt it." As the studio lights dimmed, Ibrahim paused one last time before stepping away. He turned to the camera and left. "The world with this. See the ones no one sees. Hear the ones no one hears. Stand for the ones who've been forgotten. That's where our humanity begins." Then he walked off the set. No drama, no spotlight, just silence, and something sacred left behind. Even after the show ended, the studio didn't return to business as usual. Crew members packed up gear, slowly, eyes red. Oprah sat quietly in her chair, her makeup streaked from tears. She stared into the distance, not out of exhaustion, but from something deeper. Ibrahim stood nearby, waiting quietly. Finally, Oprah walked over to him, still raw, still without her usual TV polish. "Why did you really come here tonight?" she asked softly. He didn't hesitate. "To remind people," he said, "that being seen is the greatest gift one human can give another." He paused. "You see millions, Oprah, but who sees you?" Her lips trembled. He added, "Even the strong are asking to be heard. You taught the world to listen. Now let the world listen to you, too." She closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed, then whispered, "Thank you for seeing me tonight." They hugged. No cameras captured it, but millions felt it anyway. The next morning, the world was buzzing, not with scandal or celebrity gossip, but something deeper, something forgotten. Hope. Clips of Ibrahim's words played in cafes, replayed on phones, dissected in classrooms. In Ouagadougou, thousands gathered in the streets holding signs that read, "We are seen." And more importantly, they believed it. It started as an interview, just another talk show. Bright lights, camera crews. Oprah Winfrey, poised as ever, preparing to sit across from a man few Americans had ever heard speak for more than a minute. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader from Burkina Faso, but within minutes, it didn't feel like a show anymore. It felt like church. He didn't come with a polished speech. He didn't sell a book. He didn't come to impress. He came with something far more dangerous and rare. Truth. At first, Oprah asked the expected questions about leadership, about poverty, about Africa's future. But then, she asked something raw. "How do you lead with hope?" she said, "when your people are still hurting?" Ibrahim didn't hesitate. He leaned forward and told her, "Hope doesn't come from power. It comes from being seen." And just like that, everything shifted. A few minutes later, Oprah pulled out a letter. It was from a young woman who had once written to her years ago, on the edge of giving up. Oprah had never responded. She'd always regretted it. "She felt invisible," Oprah said softly. "Like no one cared if she lived or died." Her voice cracked. Then she looked at Ibrahim and said, "Tonight you said everything I wish I'd said to her." He reached out, took the letter, and held it in his hands for a long moment. Then looked at Oprah and said, "She's still here." Oprah's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" He nodded gently. When someone is truly seen, sometimes that's enough to keep them going. The entire room fell silent, the kind of silence that holds everything: grief, hope, awe. And just then, a staffer rushed over with a message. The girl who'd written that letter had just posted something online. "I just watched this," the message read, "and I'm still here. Thank you." Oprah whispered to her producer not to cut to commercial. The cameras kept rolling. The audience held their breath. And then a studio phone rang. Live. Oprah answered it on speaker. "Hello?" A fragile voice came through. "Miss Winfrey? Is this real? Am I live?" Oprah looked at Ibrahim, then smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart. You're live." The girl sobbed into the phone. "I saw you both, and I just needed to say thank you. I thought no one saw me." Ibrahim's voice didn't waver. "You are seen," he said firmly. "You matter more than you will ever know." Even the camera crew wiped their eyes. "You saved me," the girl whispered, before the line clicked off. Oprah broke, quietly. Not for the audience, not for the show, just for real. And Ibrahim, calm as ever, put his hand on her shoulder and said, "You've been saving lives all along. Tonight just reminded you why." The interview was supposed to end 15 minutes earlier, but no one moved, no one spoke. They just sat there, in that sacred kind of silence. When Oprah finally stood, she embraced him and whispered, "I thought I was here to interview you. But you've taught me more in 1 hour than I've learned in years." Ibrahim smiled faintly. Pain teaches fast, but the heart still decides what we do with it. The studio rose to their feet in a slow, quiet standing ovation. By morning, the world was on fire, with hope. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Lionheart and I Am Seen topped every platform. People weren't arguing. They weren't outraged. They were crying, reconnecting. In Chicago, a group of teenagers painted a mural, Oprah holding a photo of Ibrahim's mother. Below, it read, "Hope is a choice." In Burkina Faso, children ran barefoot through the streets wearing handmade T-shirts with Ibrahim's face. Mothers wept with joy, not because life had changed overnight, but because someone had reminded them they mattered. Back home, Oprah sat in her living room replaying the interview, again and again. Each time, Ibrahim's voice echoed, "See the invisible, hear the voiceless." Her eyes welled. She picked up her phone and sent him a simple message. "You changed more lives in 1 hour than most of us do in a lifetime. You changed mine." And thousands of miles away, in a dusty schoolyard outside Ouagadougou, Ibrahim smiled at the message as he watched barefoot kids play soccer. A little girl tugged his hand shyly. "Sir," she asked, "why did you make Oprah cry?" He crouched beside her and smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "tears are the way hope sneaks back into the heart." She giggled and ran off. Ibrahim stood there quietly, looking up at the sky. For a moment, everything felt still and whole. That night, Oprah closed her show with a final thought. We all carry silent battles, but every now and then someone reminds us we're still human, still worthy, still seen. Thank you, Ibrahim, for reminding me. Millions wept, and somewhere deep inside, maybe even you felt it too. Because no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, being seen is what we all long for most. So if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that your life matters, don't let it stop here. Tap that like. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And drop a comment below. I am seen. Let's keep this ripple going together.